The diamond on my finger caught the light one final time as I twisted it off. 5 years of love, 18 months of planning, and just 12 hours before our wedding, Lucas sent a text. He didn't even have the decency to call, to say he'd changed his mind, when his mother phoned later, demanding I return the engagement ring. I laughed through my tears. Keep it, I repeated. No, I'm going to sell it and use the money to start over somewhere he'll never find me. One more shot. My best friend Zoe shouted, pushing a neon pink cocktail into my hand. Music thumped through the club, bass rattling the floor as my bridesmaids danced around me in matching team bride shirts, trying to salvage what was supposed to be my bachelorette party. My phone buzzed in my purse. Probably Lucas, I thought, checking in to see when I'd be home. He hated when I went out without him. But Zoe had insisted on tonight, said it would be good for me to let loose before the big day. I smiled at the thought of his jealousy as I reached into my bag, but the moment I read the message on my screen, that smile vanished. I can't go through with tomorrow. I need space to figure out what I really want. I'm sorry. I read the message once, then twice, then a third time, waiting for the punchline. Lucas was known for elaborate pranks. Just last Christmas, he gave me an empty PlayStation box, recorded my reaction, then brought out the real gift. I thought maybe this was the same kind of sick joke, but no second message came. Liv, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost, Zoe asked, grabbing my arm. I handed her my phone silently. She read the message, her eyes widening with disbelief. That absolute piece of garbage, she whispered, immediately waving the rest of our friends over. Call him, now. My hands trembled as I tapped his contact. The photo of us smiling on a beach during last summer's vacation staring back at me. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. He turned off his phone. I said, my voice eerily steady. He cancelled our wedding by text and turned off his phone. The girls gathered around me, a mix of anger and concern on their faces. I expected to fall apart, to scream, cry, break something, but instead, I felt strangely detached, like I was watching someone else's life unravel. Then my phone rang again. I nearly dropped it. Not Lucas, his mother, Regina Elizabeth, she began. Using my full name even though I'd told her repeatedly that I preferred Liv, Lucas told me about his decision. I'm going to need you to return the engagement ring. It's a family heirloom. I blinked, stunned by her audacity. A family heirloom. That was news to me. She'd never mentioned anything of the sort when Lucas proposed. In fact, I remembered them shopping for the ring together. I remembered Lucas showing me the receipt when we had it insured. Brand new, from Tiffany's. Purchased just 3 weeks before he proposed. Is it, Regina? I asked, keeping my voice cool, because I distinctly remember Lucas showing me the receipt. It's not an heirloom. It's brand new. Well, she stammered, the money for it came from family funds. So technically, before she could finish, my Aunt Maggie, who had been listening nearby, snatched the phone from my hand. Listen here, you entitled witch, Maggie said, her voice sharp. Your son just shattered my niece's heart with a text message the night before her wedding. You're lucky she doesn't sell that ring and buy herself a yacht with your name painted on the side, just to spite you. I should have been embarrassed, but I wasn't. Watching my normally reserved aunt go full mama bear for me actually made me smile. For the first time since I'd read Lucas's message, after Maggie handed me the phone back, I simply told Regina I'd think about the ring. Then hung up. The girls took me back to Zoe's apartment, and while their drunken concern surrounded me, I remained strangely calm. Shouldn't I be sobbing, pleading for answers? Instead, I sat on the couch, staring into space. Has anyone talked to Travis? I asked suddenly, referring to Lucas's best man. Maybe he knows what's going on. Zoe's fiancé Brad, who was close with Travis, made the call and put it on speaker. We all leaned in. Wait, he actually did it. Travis's voice crackled with disbelief. I thought he was just talking crazy. What do you mean? Brad asked. He's been hanging out with Madison again, Travis admitted, hesitating. His ex from college said he was having second thoughts. I didn't think. He cut himself off. I shouldn't be saying this. But it was too late. The puzzle pieces had begun to fall into place. Madison, the one he used to call the one who got away. The same Madison who had conveniently moved back to town 3 months ago. My phone buzzed again, a message from Travis. Clearly not meant for me. Dude, she's selling the ring. You still have time to stop her before she finds out about you and Madison. Fix this before you lose access to her grandmother's money. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My grandmother had left me a sizable inheritance in a trust, one that would fully transfer to me either when I turned 30 or got married. Lucas had known about it. In fact, he was the one who suggested we move the wedding date up when he learned the details. Another message arrived seconds later. Sorry, wrong person. Too late. Everything clicked. Lucas hadn't just rekindled things with Madison out of emotion. He had been plotting this exit, calculating the timing, positioning himself for maximum financial gain. Liv, Zoe asked gently, touching my shoulder. Are you okay? The numbness cracked. But it wasn't sadness that poured through, it was rage. 5 years with a man who saw me as a walking bank account with a convenient body. 5 years of shaping my life around his, adjusting my dreams, my routine, even my friendships, just to make things easier for him. 5 years I would never get back. I need some air, I said, rising and walking out onto Zoe's balcony, the cool night air washing over my flushed skin. And for the first time that night, I let myself breathe. As the tears finally flowed, they weren't for Lucas. I was mourning the version of myself that had been so desperate for love that I couldn't see the manipulation, the version of me that had diminished herself to fit into the limited space he allowed. My phone vibrated incessantly with texts from family and friends who had somehow already heard the news. I silenced it and stared at the ring still cradled in my palm, an impressive 3-carat, emerald-cut platinum band. Chosen more to impress his friends than to suit my style. Taking a deep breath, I made my first decision as a newly single woman. This ring would fund my future, a future that would be shaped by my choices alone. When I re-entered the room, my friends eyed me cautiously, bracing for a breakdown. I need a lawyer, I stated instead, and information on how to get refunds from our vendors. What are you going to do? Asked Zoe, her voice tinged with concern. I offered her a genuine smile. The first in a long time. I'm not sure yet, but I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to beg a man who never truly valued me to take me back. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I woke up on what should have been my wedding day with swollen eyes but a strange sense of lightness. Zoe had insisted I stay with her, afraid to leave me alone. Sunlight streamed through the unfamiliar curtains as I checked my phone. 9:17 a.m. By now, I should have been at the salon, surrounded by my excited bridesmaids and a tearful mother. Instead, I lay alone in Zoe's guest room, scrolling through 67 missed calls and over 100 text messages, most from shocked guests and concerned friends, none from Lucas. The wedding, scheduled for 4:00 p.m. at Riverdale Gardens with 200 guests, was now a series of cancellation notices in progress. The flowers had already been delivered to the venue. The cake was likely being assembled, and the band was probably setting up their equipment. You're awake so early, Zoe said as she appeared in the doorway with a coffee. How are you feeling? Strangely okay, I admitted, sitting up. Is that bad? Shouldn't I be more devastated? She sat beside me. Liv, you're probably in shock. There's no right way to feel when the man you were supposed to marry dumps you by text the night before your wedding. I nodded, sipping the coffee. My phone rang. It was the wedding venue coordinator, Miss Palmer. This is Diana from Riverdale Gardens. I'm so sorry about your situation. I'm calling to see how you'd like to handle today's arrangements. I hadn't even considered that part. I guess we need to cancel everything. I stammered. Of course, she replied. Regarding your deposits, our policy normally doesn't allow refunds this close to the event, but given the circumstances, she paused. The owner has authorized a 70% refund of your payments. It's not our standard practice, but we feel it's the right thing to do. I nearly choked on my coffee. The venue deposit alone was $8,000. Getting most of that back seemed impossible. Thank you, I managed to say. That's incredibly generous. No one deserves to be left at the altar, Miss Palmer. She added, we can transfer the funds back to the original payment method by the end of next week. After hanging up, I stared at my phone in disbelief. Zoe, the venue is giving me most of my money back. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Zoe went to answer it while I pulled on her borrowed robe. Voices echoed from the entryway, one unmistakably Lucas's. My heart raced as I hesitated in the hallway. She doesn't want to see you, Zoe was saying. I need to talk to her. Olivia. I know you're here, Lucas called out. I stepped into view, finding Lucas standing in Zoe's living room with his mother beside him. He looked terrible, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes. "Good," I said simply. He rushed toward me, stopping awkwardly when I didn't open my arms. "Liv, I'm so sorry about the text. I panicked, I needed to think, and have you finished thinking?" My voice remained steady, surprising even me. "I want to talk about us," he said. Glancing at his mother, who nodded encouragingly, I got scared about the wedding, about such a big commitment. "But I still love you." Regina stepped forward, her diamond necklace glinting. "Elizabeth, dear, every couple has pre-wedding jitters. Lucas made a mistake in how he expressed his concerns. But surely you can forgive one moment of weakness." I almost laughed. One moment of weakness. The secret meetings with his ex-girlfriend, the calculated attempts to access my inheritance. "I've been so upset," Lucas continued, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. "I couldn't sleep all night thinking about what I'd done." "That makes one of us," I lied, watching his expression change. Regina's smile tightened. "Now, Elizabeth, there's no need for pettiness. We should discuss rescheduling the wedding for a more appropriate time, perhaps in a month or two, once everything settles down." "I'm not interested in rescheduling," I cut in. Lucas blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "What do you mean? Are you saying you need more time?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm saying I'm not marrying you, not today, not in 2 months, not ever." Regina stepped between us. "You're just upset, dear, anyone would be, but don't make rash decisions you'll regret." "The only decision I regret," I countered, "was saying yes when Lucas proposed." Lucas's face hardened. "You don't mean that. You're just trying to hurt me because I hurt you." I laughed. But there was no humor in it, just a biting irony, classic projection. I muttered as I crossed my arms defensively. Lucas's mother chimed in, siding with him. But I was unmoved. "You both need to leave," I said firmly. Lucas, however, ignored her and pleaded with me. "We've been together for 5 years. You can't just throw that all away over one mistake." Just then, my phone rang again. It was the florist. I answered without looking away from Lucas. "Yes, the wedding is cancelled," I confirmed calmly. "I understand the flowers can't be returned, but could you please deliver them to Mercy Hospital's children's ward instead? And yes, you can charge the delivery fee to me." After hanging up, I fixed my gaze back on Lucas, my voice steady but cold. "You're right, 5 years is a long time. Long enough for me to know what I want and what I don't. And I don't want a man who only came back when he realized he might lose access to my money." His face contorted with confusion. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. It was Lucas's mother, Regina, who gasped in shock. "Lucas, you said she didn't know." That slip confirmed everything. I turned to Regina, my tone icy. "Your son has been seeing his ex-girlfriend behind my back and was worried about losing access to my inheritance. Is that the one moment of weakness you expect me to forgive?" Lucas stepped closer, desperation clear in his eyes. "Liv, it wasn't like that. Yes, I saw Madison a few times. But just as friends. And yes, I knew about your inheritance, but that's not why I proposed." "Get out," I said quietly. Regina started to interject. "Elizabeth, we can discuss this like adults." "Get out," my shout echoed in the room, startling everyone. "Get out. Or I'm calling the police and reporting harassment." Once they had left, I sat on Zoe's couch, enveloped in an odd calm. My phone continued to ring. The caterer, the photographer, more concerned friends. Each call reminded me of another part of my shattered plans, yet each also presented an unexpected opportunity. When Zoe brought me lunch, I was making a list in a notebook. Ironically, our wedding notebook. "What's this?" she asked, looking over my shoulder. "Lists," I explained. "What I've lost versus what I've gained." The lost column included obvious things like the relationship, wedding, and future plans. But the gained column surprised me with its length. Freedom to make my own decisions, escape from Lucas's controlling behavior, relief from his mother's criticisms, and time to pursue forgotten interests. As I flipped through the wedding notebook, I found an old letter from my grandmother tucked into the back pocket. I had placed it there for inspiration during the stressful planning process. "My dearest Olivia," it read, "remember that happiness isn't found in perfect plans, but in perfect adaptability. My greatest regret was never visiting Paris after your grandfather died. I'd saved for that trip for years but never found the right time. Don't wait for the right time, make the time right. Love always, Grandma Rose. I stared at the letter, then at my phone still ringing with calls about wedding cancellations, then at my wedding notebook filled with plans that were no longer relevant. Zoe, I said slowly. What if I use the wedding refunds for something else entirely? Like what? I held up my grandmother's letter. Like Paris. Paris, Zoe repeated, surprised. You mean, like a trip to recover? Not just a trip, I said, feeling excitement build for the first time in 24 hours. What if I went for a few months? I can work remotely. I've always wanted to study art there. But what about your apartment, your life here? Zoe asked, skeptical. I thought about my apartment filled with furniture Lucas had selected, the routine we'd established centered around his preferences, the friends I'd lost because he didn't like them. Maybe I need a completely fresh start, I mused, away from Lucas, his mother, the pitying looks I'll get from everyone who knows I was dumped the night before my wedding. Are you sure that's not just running away? Zoe looked concerned. Maybe it is, I admitted, but right now, running away sounds a whole lot better than staying here and trying to piece together a life that was mostly built around Lucas anyway. I picked up my phone and opened a new note. At the top, I wrote Paris Fund. Below it, I began listing potential refunds: venue, catering, flowers, photographer, videographer, DJ, honeymoon reservations. For the first time since reading Lucas's text, I felt a spark of genuine excitement about the future. My future without Lucas. Monday morning. I walked into First National Bank with my engagement ring in a small velvet pouch. The diamond caught the fluorescent lights as I placed it on the counter of the safety deposit box area. I'd like to access my box, please, I told the clerk, sliding over my ID, inside the private room. I opened the metal container and removed a folder of documents. Grandma Rose had been meticulous about keeping records. There it was, the insurance appraisal for the ring Lucas had given me, valued at $32,500. Although I knew he'd only paid about $18,000, having bragged about the deal he'd gotten through a friend in the jewelry business, 2 hours later, I left Precision Jewelers with a cashier's check for $16,400. The jeweler had been upfront about the resale value being lower than retail, but it was still nearly 3 months' salary for me, more than enough to start my Paris fund. You sure about this, honey? The woman behind the counter eyed my ring, her voice carrying a hint of admiration. It's a beautiful ring, she commented. I'm sure, I replied nonchalantly, shrugging off the compliment. It's just a thing. My next stop was the wedding planner's office. Melissa, the planner, met me with a hug so full of sympathy that it nearly shattered my composure. I'm so sorry, Olivia, what can I do to help? She asked gently. I needed to cancel everything. So I pulled out my notebook. I need to contact all the vendors and see about refunds, I explained. Melissa nodded understandingly. The venue already offered to return most of the deposit. That's unusual but not unheard of in these circumstances. Let's see what I can do with the others. For the next 3 hours, we were on the phone with every vendor. Melissa's industry connections were invaluable. The caterer agreed to refund 60% since they could repurpose the food for another event. The photographer returned half of our deposit, the DJ refunded everything but a small booking fee. And the florist, unable to refund the flowers, waived the remaining payment we owed. You're looking at about $22,000 back from vendors. Melissa calculated, clearly surprised. That's honestly the best outcome I've ever seen for a cancellation this close to the date. Thank you, I said, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. You have no idea what this means to me. Curious, she asked, if you don't mind me asking, what will you do with it? I hesitated for a moment before deciding to share my plans. I'm going to Paris, not just to visit, but to stay for a while, maybe take some art classes. It's something I gave up when Lucas and I got serious. Melissa's eyes lit up. That's the best kind of revenge plan I've ever heard. Good for you. On my way out, she handed me a business card. My cousin runs a small gallery in Montmartre. Tell her I sent you. Back at Zoe's apartment, I made another list. Give notice at my apartment. Tell my boss about working remotely, sell or store furniture, get a visa, book a flight. I was researching visa requirements when my phone rang. Lucas, calling for the 12th time that day. I declined the call and returned to my research. A knock at the door interrupted me. Zoe was at work. So I approached cautiously and peeped through the peephole. Lucas stood in the hallway, holding flowers. I know you're in there, Liv, your car is outside, he called through the door. I didn't respond. I'm not leaving until you talk to me, he insisted, against my better judgment. I opened the door but stood firmly in the doorway. What do you want, Lucas? He thrust the flowers at me. Roses, which I'd always told him I disliked. I didn't take them. I want to talk, he said. You're not answering my calls. Because I have nothing to say to you, I replied. Don't be like that. We need to discuss things like adults. We have nothing to discuss. You ended our relationship, I countered. Feeling a mix of anger and resolve, his expression hardened. I've been talking to our friends. Everyone thinks you're overreacting. I made a mistake, but it's not worth throwing away 5 years. Our friends? You mean your friends who knew you were seeing Madison behind my back? Lucas flinched. It wasn't like that. We only met up a few times in hotels, he attempted to explain. But I cut him off, having seen the credit card statements. Lucas, I was balancing our joint account last month. Remember? His face turned pale, then flushed with anger. You had no right to look at my personal expenses. It was our joint wedding account, which I contributed to every month. The account you used to pay for hotel rooms with your ex-girlfriend. I retorted. You know what? It doesn't even matter anymore. We're done. What about the ring? He demanded, switching tactics. My mother wants it back. I sold it. I replied coolly. You what? He exploded. That ring cost me $118,000. As I know, I got $16,400 for it. I informed him calmly. Lucas looked as though he might faint. You had no right. Actually, legally, I had every right. An engagement ring is a conditional gift, and you broke the condition by ending the engagement, I explained, my tone firm. Your lawyer will tell you the same thing. Now please leave before I call security. I closed the door on his stunned face and leaned against it, heart pounding but feeling strangely empowered. The next day, I walked into the marketing firm where I'd worked for the past 3 years and requested a meeting with my boss, Janet. Olivia. How are you holding up? She asked, leading me into her office. News of my personal life had traveled fast in our small company. I'm okay, I replied. But I need to discuss something important with you. I'd like to work remotely for a few months. Janet raised her eyebrows. Remote work? From where? Paris, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I've been wanting to take some art classes there, and with everything that's happened, it seems like the right time. To my surprise, Janet didn't immediately dismiss the idea. Your clients love you, and most of your work can be done anywhere, she mused. We've been talking about expanding into European markets anyway. How long are you thinking? 3 months initially, I said, maybe longer if it works out. She nodded slowly. Let me talk to the partners. No promises, but I think we can make something work. As I left her office, I accidentally ran into someone in the hallway. Sorry, I wasn't looking, I started, then stopped when I realized who it was. Madison Porter, Lucas's ex-girlfriend, now apparently back in his life. We stared at each other, the tension palpable. Awkwardly, I stood frozen. I hadn't seen her since college, long before Lucas and I had even started dating, and yet, she looked exactly the same. Tall, blonde, and effortlessly stylish in that intimidating way some women just are. Olivia, she said softly, almost gently. I'm so sorry. For what part exactly? I asked, unable to keep the sharpness out of my voice. Sleeping with my fiancé before our wedding, or showing up afterward to gloat? Madison's eyes widened with surprise, and maybe even a flicker of shame. I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to see Janet about the Westfield campaign, she said, then paused. And for what it's worth, I didn't know you and Lucas were still together when we first reconnected. When was that? I asked, the question rolling out before I could stop it. February, she admitted after a beat. He told me you two were breaking up, that the engagement was just for show, while you sorted things out. February, 6 months ago, while we were tasting wedding cake samples and sending out invitations. When did you find out the truth? I asked, my voice quieter now, more curious than angry. Last month, I saw your wedding announcement in the Tribune, she said, looking genuinely upset. I confronted him. He swore he was going to end things with you. I didn't know he'd wait until the night before. I didn't know whether to believe her. Maybe she'd been fooled like I was. Maybe she hadn't. But strangely, I found that I no longer cared. Lucas's betrayal was total. Whether Madison had been complicit or just another pawn in his web didn't matter anymore. Well, he's all yours now, I said flatly. Madison shook her head. Not anymore. I ended it the moment I found out what he did to you. I was actually coming to warn you. He's been telling people you had some kind of mental breakdown. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound echoing down the hallway. Of course he is. That's classic Lucas, rewriting the narrative so he's never the bad guy. We stood there in silence for a beat, the air between us thick with the residue of too many lies. Then Madison spoke again. I heard a rumor you're moving to Paris. News travels fast, I said with a small shrug. I lived there for a year after college. She offered. It's a magical place to reinvent yourself. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a business card, scribbling something on the back. This is my old landlady's contact info. She rents apartments to Americans at good rates. Tell her Maddie sent you. I took the card, surprised by the gesture and the unexpected shift in our dynamic. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. As Madison walked away, the final piece of my plan snapped into place. Paris wasn't just a fantasy anymore, it was becoming a tangible, reachable future. That night, I booked a one-way ticket to Paris, scheduled to depart in 3 weeks. The same day Lucas and I were supposed to leave for our honeymoon. 3 weeks later, my plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Rain tapped softly against the windows as the passengers around me gathered their belongings. According to our original itinerary, Lucas and I should have been landing in Bora Bora right about now, ready for 2 weeks of sun, surf, and luxury. Instead, I stood alone in Paris, holding 2 suitcases, a backpack, and a one-way ticket with no return date. Bienvenue à Paris, mademoiselle, the immigration officer mumbled, barely glancing at me as he stamped my passport. I'd been granted a 6-month visa, with the possibility of extension, 6 months to start over, 6 months to build a version of myself untouched by heartbreak, untouched by Lucas. I made my way through the bustling terminal, following the signs toward the taxi stand. My phone buzzed, a text from Zoe, landed safe, miss you already. I sent back a thumbs up and a heart emoji before double-checking the address Madison's landlady had emailed me. It wasn't in a touristy district, but a residential neighborhood in the 11th arrondissement, authentic Paris living, Madame Rousseau had promised. Rain fell steadily as the taxi wound through the streets of Paris. We passed landmarks I'd only seen in movies, the Eiffel Tower rising in the distance, the Arc de Triomphe, the Seine with its bridges glowing under the wet sky. Soon, the cab turned onto narrower streets lined with flower shops, boulangeries, and tall apartment buildings with iron balconies. Voila, mademoiselle, the driver announced, stopping in front of a cream-colored building with blue shutters on Rue Lapérouse. I paid the fare and stepped onto the slick sidewalk, the rain instantly soaking into my jacket. This wasn't a 5-star resort, it wasn't the honeymoon suite I'd once dreamed of. But something about the worn elegance of the building made me smile. This was real, this was Paris. Madame Rousseau answered the door almost immediately. She was a petite woman in her 70s, with silver hair pinned into a neat bun and bright red lipstick that made her look somehow both strict and charming. "Ah, you must be Olivia," she said in heavily accented English, ushering me inside. Come, come. You are wet like a little duck." She led me up 4 steep flights of narrow stairs, chatting the whole way. "Maddie, she tells me all about you. So brave, coming to Paris alone. When I was young, I also came here alone. Best decision of my life." The apartment was a tiny studio tucked under the eaves, with slanted ceilings, a dormer window overlooking a quiet courtyard, and the scent of old wood lingering in the air. It had a small kitchenette, worn wooden floors, and a surprisingly sleek modern bathroom, perfect for one person, Madame Rousseau declared proudly. And the rent, very good price. Madison say to give you the special rate. I walked over to the window and looked out at the rain-covered rooftops of Paris. My heart pounded with a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. This wasn't just a temporary escape anymore, it was a new beginning, a real one, and this little attic apartment, in a city where no one knew who I had been, was now my home. I was here, I had actually done it, alone in Paris. But no longer lost. "It's perfect," I said sincerely. After Madame Rousseau departed with my first month's rent in cash, I began unpacking my suitcases in the small but cozy apartment that came furnished with just the essentials: a bed, a small table, 2 chairs, and a wardrobe. I arranged my few personal items, a photo of me with my parents, Grandma Rose's letter framed beautifully, and a small watercolor set I had bought before leaving. Exhaustion from the journey hit me suddenly, and I lay down on the bed, feeling the jet lag wash over me in waves. The last thing I saw before drifting off was the rain tracing delicate patterns on the window glass, and I thought to myself, Lucas doesn't even know where I am right now. Hours later, I woke disoriented. The rain had stopped and golden evening light streamed through the window. My stomach growled, a stark reminder that I hadn't eaten since the plane. Venturing down to the street, I found a quaint cafe on the corner. With my limited French, I managed to order a sandwich and coffee, which I savored while observing Parisians stroll by. Nobody looked at me with pity or whispered as I walked by. Nobody knew my story here, and the anonymity felt like freedom. Back in the apartment, I sent emails to my parents and closest friends, updating them with my new address and phone number. I had only told my family about the Paris plan days before leaving. My father had been concerned about finances, but I showed him my spreadsheet. Between the money from the ring, wedding refunds, and my savings, I had enough for 6 months in Paris. Even without my remote work income, as I prepared for bed, I realized something remarkable. I hadn't checked Lucas's social media once that day, for the first time in weeks. I hadn't wondered what he was doing or who he was with. The realization felt like putting down a heavy bag I hadn't known I was carrying. The next morning, I woke to sunshine and the sounds of the city starting its day. Today was my first full day in Paris, and I had a mission: find Plead du Bois. My grandmother's old friend. Before her death 5 years ago, Grandma Rose had often spoken of her friendship with Clee, a woman she met during her only trip to Europe in the 1970s. They had maintained a correspondence for decades. In her letter, Grandma had mentioned that Clee owned a bookshop in the Latin Quarter. After a breakfast of coffee and a croissant at the corner cafe, I took the metro to the Latin Quarter and began my search. The neighborhood bustled with students and tourists, its narrow streets lined with bookshops, cafes, and universities. On my third attempt, at a small bookshop with Librairie du Coeur painted above the door, I found her. Clee du Bois was nothing like I had imagined. Tall and elegant, with streaks of silver in her black hair, dressed in a stylish blazer and a red scarf, she exuded an air of sophistication. She looked up as the bell above the door jingled. Bonjour, she greeted me. Can I help you find something? Are you Clee du Bois? I asked. I'm Olivia Palmer, Rose Palmer's granddaughter. Clee's face transformed with recognition and delight. Rose's granddaughter, mon cher, she exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace me. Her perfume enveloped me in a cloud of something floral and sophisticated. Rose wrote to me about you many times, she said, holding me at arm's length to study my face, but she didn't tell me you were coming to Paris. It was a sudden decision, I explained, unsure how much to share. Clee raised an eyebrow. The best kind, she remarked. Come, let's have tea. She flipped the sign on the door to closed and led me to a small room at the back of the shop where a kettle already simmered on a hot plate. As she prepared tea, I explained my situation, an abbreviated version that mentioned the cancelled wedding but omitted the humiliating details. So, you came to Paris to heal your heart, she asked, passing me a cup of fragrant tea. Not just that, I replied. I've always wanted to study art here. My grandmother encouraged me to follow that dream. But then life happened, and I set aside my dreams for someone else's. Clee finished for me. Rose did the same. You know, she was a talented painter. When she visited Paris, she considered staying to study art, but she returned to America for her family. This was a side of my grandmother I'd never heard about. She wanted to stay in Paris. Clee nodded. For a time, she chose a different path, but she often wrote about her regret at not pursuing her art more seriously. She took a sip of tea. So, now you are here, perhaps completing a circle your grandmother began. The idea brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Before I could respond, my phone chimed with an incoming email. I glanced at it automatically and froze. It was from Lucas Montgomery. The subject read, "We need to talk, is something wrong?" Clee asked, noticing my expression. Just my ex, I said, shoving the phone back in my bag without opening the message. Clee nodded knowingly. They always reach out just when you begin to forget them, she said, patting my hand. Now, tell me about these art classes you want to take. By the time we finished our tea, I felt renewed, ready to explore the new paths that Paris might lead me down, far from the shadows of my past. After leaving the bookstore, I found myself with a list of recommended studios and art schools, an invitation to Sunday dinner at Cadet's apartment, and a comforting sense that I had found an anchor in this new city. That evening, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened Lucas's email. His message read, "Liv, I don't know where you've gone, but this is childish. Your parents won't tell me anything. We need to discuss the apartment lease and our joint accounts. Everyone is worried about you. Running away won't solve anything. Please be an adult about this." His condescending tone burned, but surprisingly, it didn't hurt as it would have 3 weeks ago. I quickly typed a brief reply, "I'm fine. Contact me only through my lawyer regarding financial matters. I'm not running away, I'm running towards something better." I pressed send, then blocked his email address. The next day, I visited the first art studio on Cadet's list, a quaint atelier near the Seine that offered classes in watercolor techniques. The instructor, Marcel, a gruff man in his 60s, examined my limited portfolio with a critical eye. "You have talent but no discipline," he declared. "You must unlearn bad habits before you can progress." I signed up for his twice-weekly class on the spot. As I left the studio, rain began to fall again, but I didn't mind. The grey skies and glossy wet sidewalks only made Paris more enchanting. Walking back to my apartment, I passed a cafe with a "Help Wanted" sign in the window. On impulse, I stepped inside. My remote work would cover my basics, but extra income would extend my time in Paris. More importantly, it would be a way to meet people and practice my French. The owner, Philippe, spoke enough English to understand my limited French. After a brief conversation where I explained I could work mornings before my art classes, he offered me a trial period as a server. "Americans are good for business," he said with a wink. "Tourists like seeing other Americans." When I returned to my apartment that evening and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, the woman staring back seemed different somehow, more alive, her eyes brighter, her posture straighter. Just a week ago, I should have been returning from my honeymoon with Lucas, settling back into our shared apartment to begin our married life. Instead, I was in Paris with a new apartment, new art classes, and even a new part-time job. For the first time in years, my life was entirely my own creation. I slept that night without dreaming of Lucas, without waking to check my phone, without the gnawing anxiety that had been my constant companion since the breakup. Paris was working its magic already. 3 months passed in a blur of watercolor classes, morning shifts at Philippe's cafe, and long walks through Parisian neighborhoods. My small apartment began to feel like home. Decorated with my own paintings and treasures from Parisian flea markets, my French improved from embarrassing to passable. I made friends, other artists at the studio, regular customers at the cafe, and Cadet's eclectic circle of book lovers. Marcel, my watercolor instructor, had moved me from basic techniques to more advanced classes. "You have found your eye," he told me one day, examining my painting of rain-slicked cobblestones. "Now you must find your voice." I wasn't entirely sure what he meant, but I took it as a compliment. On a crisp October morning, I received an unexpected email from Marcel. The subject line read, "Exhibition Opportunity." My heart raced as I opened it. "Olivia. A small gallery in Montmartre has a last-minute opening in their Emerging Artists exhibition next week. I've recommended you and 2 other students. Please bring 3 pieces to class tomorrow for final selection." Marcel, I stared at the screen in disbelief. An exhibition? My work on display in a Paris gallery? It seemed impossible. Yet the email was real. I spent the day frantically reviewing my portfolio, selecting my strongest pieces, a watercolor of the view from my apartment window, a study of Cadet's bookshop, and a more abstract piece inspired by the Seine at sunset. When I arrived at the studio the next day, Marcel examined my selections with his usual critical gaze. After what felt like hours, he nodded. "These will do. The gallery owner will make the final selections tomorrow." 2 days later, I received confirmation. All 3 pieces had been accepted. The exhibition would open the following Friday evening. "You must invite everyone you know," Cadet insisted when I shared the news over dinner at her apartment. "Your first Paris exhibition is a milestone." I sent emails to my parents, Zoe, and a few other close friends, not expecting anyone to fly across an ocean for a small exhibition. Still, sharing the news felt important, proof that my impulsive escape to Paris had become something meaningful. The morning of the exhibition, I received an exhilarating message from Zoe. "Surprise, Just landed in Paris. Wild horses couldn't keep me from your big night. Send your address ASAP. Hours later, I found myself embracing my best friend in the cozy confines of my tiny apartment, both of us oscillating between laughter and tears. I can't believe you came all this way, I exclaimed, dabbing at my eyes. Are you kidding? Your first gallery showing. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Zoe replied, scanning my apartment approvingly. This place is so you, the real you. Before Lucas tried to mold you into his perfect corporate wife, her words resonated deeply, reminding me of how much I had changed during my relationship with Lucas. Sacrificing my passion for painting, adopting his preferences in everything from food to furniture, even altering my wardrobe to suit his tastes. I have so much to tell you, I said, excitement bubbling within me. But first, we need to get ready for tonight, the gallery. A small but chic space nestled on a quaint side street in Montmartre, buzzed with energy by the time Zoe and I arrived. Marcel, a friend, introduced me to Camille, the gallery owner. Her rapid-fire French initially overwhelmed me, but she switched to English when she noticed my struggle. Your work has soul, she assured me, her eyes reflecting sincerity. It is not technically perfect, but it possesses a feeling that cannot be taught. As I wandered through the gallery, I was in awe to see my paintings professionally displayed, each accompanied by a small card bearing my name. Zoe, ever the supportive friend, took countless photos, insisting I pose next to each piece. Olivia Palmer, international artist, she declared jubilantly. Lucas is going to die when he sees these on Instagram. I don't care what Lucas thinks anymore, I realized aloud, and I meant it. As we sipped champagne, Clet, another friend, arrived with an elegantly dressed older man, a longtime patron of her bookstore. They both admired my paintings, engaging me with insightful questions about my techniques and inspirations. After they moved on, Zoe nudged me excitedly. That man just bought your painting, the one of the bookstore. Are you sure? I asked, incredulous. I saw him talking to the gallery owner and pointing at it. Then they put a red dot on the card. That means sold. Right. By the end of the evening, 2 of my 3 paintings had sold. Camille, handing me a glass of champagne, toasted, to new beginnings, and to your next exhibition, which I hope will be here. Later that night, back in my apartment, Zoe and I sat on my bed, indulging in pastries and catching up on the whirlwind of the past 3 months. You need to know something, Zoe said hesitantly. Lucas's sister, Sandra, contacted me last week. She's in Paris on business and asked if she could come to your exhibition. Why would she want to see me? I questioned, my stomach tightening. She says she wants to apologize, Zoe explained. Apparently, things aren't going well for Lucas. After you left, people started asking questions. Then he dated Madison again, but she dumped him. His company passed him over for promotion, and word got out about him canceling the wedding by text. Absorbing this information, I felt a surprising detachment. Months ago, news of Lucas's misfortunes might have stirred satisfaction or pain, but now it felt like distant echoes of a life I no longer lived. Did she come tonight? I inquired. No, but she's still in Paris for 2 more days. I can tell her you're not interested if you want, Zoe offered. I considered for a moment. No, I'll meet her, not because of Lucas, but because Sandra was always kind to me. The next morning, I met Sandra at a cafe near the Louvre. She had Lucas's eyes and smile, but exuded a warmth he lacked. Thank you for seeing me, she began. Once we had ordered coffee. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I admitted. I owe you an apology, she continued, her gaze steady and sincere. I knew Lucas was seeing Madison before the wedding, and I said nothing. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. Why tell me now? I asked. Because I've seen what keeping secrets has done to our family, she explained. My father had affairs for years while my mother looked the other way. Lucas learned from their example that it's okay to deceive those you love. After Sandra left, I strolled through the Tuileries garden, reflecting on everything that had transpired since that life-altering text message 4 months ago. The shock and pain had faded, replaced by an unexpected gratitude. Lucas canceling our wedding had seemed like the end of my world, but it had actually been the beginning of a much better one. That evening, I received an email from Janet, my boss back home. What had started as a temporary remote work arrangement had evolved into a proposal for me to head a new Paris office. Think about it, Janet wrote. This could be permanent if you want it to be. The timing was uncanny. My initial 6-month visa would expire in 2 months. And I had been avoiding thinking about what came next, whether to return to my old life or find a way to stay in Paris. Now, standing at my apartment window, gazing out at the Paris rooftops bathed in sunset, I knew my answer. The woman who had arrived in Paris 4 months ago, heartbroken, angry, and lost, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, braver, and happier. I opened my notebook and began a letter. Dear Lucas, thank you for cancelling our wedding. It was the best gift you could have given me. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so feel free to share your opinions, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories. We'll see you in the next video.